Call to order. We'll do the, I guess we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Gina, you got to take off mute and lead us in this.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with
with
liberty.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. That was great. We'll do a roll call. Mary Ann?
Mr. Durkin,
Here.
Ms. Ruska, Mr. Jacobs,
Here.
Ms. Sierra,
Here.
Ms. Towner,
Here.
Ms. Salas, and Mr. Smithing.
Here. All right, we'll do visitor statements. We have any visitor statements?
I'm doing one less scan, but I do not see visitors.
All right. At this point, I'd like to move the president's report up. I have a statement I would like to give. I think it'll stand for itself. So, and here we go. The Riverside Brookfield High School Board of Education stands in solidarity with our students, parents, faculty, staff, and community members of color. Building on the comments of our superintendent and our principal, we want to express our frustration, sadness, and anger with the killing of George Floyd and with the persistent racism and inequities that plague our nation. We stand with those who peacefully demand justice and equality, and we stand against systems and practices that obstruct the realization of those ideals. As elected representatives of the entire Riverside Brookfield High School community, it is our responsibility to ask hard questions and demand answers. We're individually and collectively doing enough to become part of the solution. Is the district well enough prepared to keep up with the events of a rapidly changing world? Are all of us innovative and courageous and open enough to invite uncomfortable discussions and debates among all Riverside Brookfield stakeholders? Education is the best antidote to prejudice and discrimination. There is no better way to challenge our own assumptions and come to appreciate cultural differences than to live and learn together with people from a wide variety of backgrounds. At Riverside Brookfield, we strive to value character as well as intellect. It commits us to helping students develop their capacities to think freely, critically, humanely, and to conduct themselves with honor, integrity, and civility. We ask all members of the Riverside Brookfield community to listen and seek to understand, to empathize and support, to speak up and suggest. On our path towards healing, we must start by encouraging dialogue within a culture of respect and courage. Whether you are a student, a teacher, or a parent, we ask that you make your voice heard. This board's commitment to you is to listen, to learn, and to demand fair and equitable answers from ourselves and the stakeholders in our district's community. We ask you to join us in the work ahead. Together, we will rise to this occasion. Thank you for the time. With that, we will move to next item, discussion information items. We'll go to the FOIA request.
There were no FOIA requests for this meeting.
All right, then we'll move to the Riverside Brookfield COVID-19 information plan.
Okay, so based on the local media, it appears that we would be trending towards phase 4, possibly early July, maybe even late June. You're starting to see some restrictions slowly be lifted. There were some updates from the IHSA here I'll touch on briefly. There were also some updates in regards regards to summer school sent out by the state. Now, our summer school program had already started, but I think the trend we're starting to see is that we could see some of the guidelines and restrictions that were put in under the governor's 5-phase plan to be maybe softened or move to a phase 4 at a much sooner pace. Once we are in phase 4, the board would transition back to in-person meetings. And so my recommendation is that we set a tentative in-person meeting for the July 14th. Obviously, if there's a spike in cases or something changes and we can't do an in-person meeting, we can continue with the Zoom platform. But at this point in time, I would recommend that we try to look at doing an in-person meeting in July, whether that be in the alumni lounge or even possibly in the main gym. We're working through some things with our facility staff and RBTV staff, but that's something to be on the lookout for. I go down to return to work. 12-month employees have returned to work. We implemented summer hours starting this week, which is 7:30 to 3:30 Monday through Friday. We do have 12-month employees that are using their vacation time, both administrators and support staff. So we're trying to limit the business in the building to essential business only. So parents, if you have a fee balance you need to pay or a fee question, you need to pick up paperwork, a transcript, something that you don't feel comfortable calling or emailing in, that essential business can be addressed in the building. But we would ask that if you could handle something electronically or over the phone, to try that first. The RB COVID-19 committee, transition committee, has been established. There's representatives from the administration, the faculty, parents, instructional coaches. I have our 2 student board members on there as well. And so that we are trying to set our first meeting date for sometime next week. Return to school. The transition committee will assist with the planning that we're working with local groups and state associations to try to identify the restrictions and see if we can get some of these guidelines lifted. I spent some time this week both on a call with the West 40 superintendents as well as the high school, Illinois High School District organization, which is all the superintendents from high schools throughout the state of Illinois. The bigger concern is from the high school district in that the current guidelines that are in place from the CDC, whether we came back in some type of hybrid model or some type of in-person model, it's going to be next to impossible to operate a high school schedule with those current guidelines. So the High School Superintendents Association is working on a letter to the State Board of Education, also a letter to the state task force who's working on the COVID side for the education side, and see if we can work with them to get some of these guidelines lifted. The preliminary guidelines that were out there apply more to middle school, where students are in middle or elementary schools, where students are kind of in the same classroom all day. They eat their lunch in the same classroom. Obviously, that would not work for a traditional high school where you have to change classrooms. You have to go to classrooms where there's labs, CTE classrooms, those types of things. So more information will follow. I'll continue to work on that through the transition committee, and I'll provide updates accordingly to the board in July. An example was they told us all through May that all summer school had to be virtual. So we are doing virtual summer school, and then last Friday they came out and they said we could do in-person summer school as long as it's under groups of 10. And so one thing that we've tried to do throughout this whole period of time from March on is, once we put out information to our families, is not trying to retract it and changing our direction mid-stride. So we will continue to run virtual summer school and virtual extended school year for anybody with an IEP that has extended school year hours. And then we'll just continue to work with our transition committee on planning the next school year. In communication items related to COVID, I thought the virtual graduation ceremony and the drive-up graduation ceremony was a huge hit with the community and with all the seniors. So I want to thank all the board members for participating in that. A big shout out to Dr. Freitas, Mr. Mannon, Ms. Lindquist, all the administrators, all the teachers, all the support staff, everybody that did their part. Thank you very much. We received a ton of positive feedback from the community, so thank you. We'll continue to watch that possibility of the in-person ceremony on June 29th, but it doesn't look as if the restrictions for 1,000 plus gatherings will be lifted. But I will send out that communication as promised closer to the end of June. There is a curriculum advisory council. I could touch on that later. So in regards to anything else related to the summer, virtual summer school's in place. Obviously, the youth summer camps have canceled. That has not changed. The June summer rentals have been canceled. We'll be sending out an update about July. The IHSA has released general guidance for athletes to return to some form of conditioning and strength training, non-sport specific. So the guidelines that were sent out is that coaches can get together with their athletes in groups of greater than 10. They can do conditioning and strength training, agility training, but they shouldn't be using equipment specific to their sport. So I know Brendan Curtin was working with both conference ADs and head coaches to come up with finalized plans that the athletes would need to follow to begin coming back on campus and to work out with their coaches. Dr. Freitas will provide a residency update during the principal's report, and I believe that is it for the COVID update.
All right. That's a lot to swallow there.
What?
Go ahead, Gina.
Oh, thanks. I just have a fast question. I saw that in the ISB guidance, they had addressed guidance for driver's ed. Are we doing driver's ed this summer? Is that part of summer school?
Thank you very much for that reminder. Actually, Hector is working right now with Mr. Reck, who is our driver's ed coordinator, and they are going to begin to put out some guidelines to families so that we can do some form of behind the wheel this summer. Hector can maybe touch on this. Hector, I know you were working with Jason on which students would have first access to it, with students from the fourth quarter.
Yeah, boss, this is part of my principal's report. I'll touch up on one at my time, okay? I'll address it.
I just want to reiterate, and I think probably I speak for everyone, the graduation ceremony was very moving. I actually did not mind one bit that it took up about 7 hours of my day from the time we left to go for the parade till the virtual online was done, and enjoyed every minute of the 3 hours of standing there and cheering for all those kids. So very well done. I've gotten compliments from people in the community and actually people outside of the community who have nieces, nephews, friends who have kids, have all commented on how well that we did. So good work, everyone.
All right, so let's go to the mission statement. And how do we want to, we've talked about maybe doing this.
If you can show the mission statements on page 4 of board book, share the screen, please. Okay, so right there at the top of the screen is our current mission statement. And then what I did is, based on only one board member submitted some suggestions on how to maybe do this in the open session today. And so what I did is I regrouped the mission statements. Mike, if you could scroll down with me a little bit, or let me access the screen. The first 4 define kind of is trying to figure out how it's a definition of who RB is and what our partnership is. Those are in the first 4. So you'll see Riverside Brookfield is a partnership appearance, and it kind of says this, they all start, the first 4 start that way. Then numbers 5 through, I believe, 9. Yes, 5 through 9 are more of a concise one-sentence statement. So I think the first thing the board should really discuss tonight is whether they're looking for a more of a robust statement that defines the partnership, or if they're looking for a concise statement. And then if they're looking for a concise statement, we can then eliminate some of these from the list and then maybe narrow our selection down from 5 through 9, or just a portion of one of the other top 4. So Wes, I'll turn that back to you and see how you, if you want to poll the board or get any discussion from the board.
Right, so do we have any discussion, any thoughts? I guess we could just go one-on-one what we think. Got a quick pool. I personally kind of like the more concise, short to the point, but I'll let you raise your hand. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Wes. So I have a problem with the really short ones, because the short ones are more like a tagline or you know, whatever you want to call it. But I think the real question behind that is, is this statement meant to be more like something that people, you know, that almost every member of the RB community could recite, at which point something like 7 or 8 or 9, you know, might be okay, or obviously that's much easier than remembering a whole paragraph. But at the same time, I have a real issue with both 8 and 9. I mean, they say absolutely nothing. The pathway to success or individual greatness, that's not good enough as far as I'm concerned. I believe that a mission statement, if I look at versions 1 through 4, and I think that's why the current mission statement is not bad either. I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with it necessarily, but I believe a mission statement that's appropriate for a high school ought to be, it's not something that you expect anybody to remember, but any member of the community ought to be able to refer to the mission statement and get, in some descriptive language, get a sense of what is it all about. I mean, and describe a little more about the how and why it matters and by who and all that kind of stuff. And I will close my initial comment by just, you know, my version is the one that really completely started from scratch, i.e. number 4, because I believe the current mission statement is not bad at all. If we start tweaking it, it's like, why do we even spend the time? There's probably a significant amount of time that we're going to talk back and forth about it. Why even do it? I believe if we're committed to doing this, we probably need to figure out a better or an appropriate process of hashing this out, which will likely not all happen tonight or even in 2 more board meetings. But my point is simply like this. When you see what a jolt came to the school with the new focus on culture, and it had to do with strategic hires and so forth. Now, people are now talking about RB, about the significantly greater cultural, I mean, people have more of a sense of belonging and so forth because of some very new initiatives that were implemented. And I think it would be commensurate to rethink the mission statement in a much more, I'll just say it, progressive and forward-looking and in relationship to the times we live in. And that's why I took a completely new crack at it and proposed statement number 4.
And Gina, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, I respectfully disagree. I am in favor of a more concise statement, whether it's one of these 5 through 9 or not. You know, the reality is I think that a really long mission, I just think it gets lost. I do like the idea of a tagline, but I don't know if 5 through 9 is one of them that I would go with, but I'm in favor of more concise. Thank you.
Deanna, you had some thoughts?
I was one of those people that did not unmute, I'm sorry. Yeah, I kind of wanted to get the sense of where the group was on a large statement or a small statement. I hear both sides of it. My position is the current statement it does need to be dusted off and looked at. And that's what this whole goal setting, strategic planning process is about. But I'm also mindful that a quick and succinct statement that people can repeat is helpful. So, I'm almost looking for that larger statement. I want the best of all worlds, like the larger statement that has a portion of it that can be repeated back within the halls. So I don't really have a good answer, except for we're not there yet. We still have 9 pretty different options that are all over the place. And I just think we need to narrow it down someplace so we can get that additional feedback from the community that we talked about.
So how do we think we want to go forward? Do we want to, we can pick, if everybody gives me one suggestion, then we can bring back 7. Then we narrow that down, and then, that'll be July, and then August we can narrow it down. In July we can take the 7, in August we can kind of wrap it up.
Well, if I may, I just heard Tom say he was against 7 and 8, so maybe we can even, I hear what you're suggesting. That makes sense.
Yeah, so if everybody picks one, then at the most we have 7 suggestions, right? But I have a feeling somebody's going to pick the same as somebody else. So, and then we'll come back and we'll say, okay, these are the top 7. Let's do another round, and we'll get that down to 4, and then we can we'll get the top 4, and then we'll just pick one. I think that's probably the best way to do it, unless someone's got a different suggestion. Go ahead, Gina.
So are we not going to decide on a concise or a lengthy one? Like, shouldn't we do that first and then?
Well, I don't know. I mean, what can we have I guess we'll have a straw poll. I think that'll bring us down to that. It'll bring us down to it. Because I think some of these have, when you take, so my thought, Tom, when you take out who the stakeholders are, you're really down to a pretty concise statement. To your point, right? Is you want it to be concise. To Deanna's point, you want it to be memorable in the, once we take out who the partnership of parents, students, board, education, community, also we're down to pretty much a one-line statement. I don't know do we need to define the stakeholders, or do we not need to define the stakeholders?
But can I respond to this? I really like Deanna's comment about, this is from my experience of having done this within other organizations, within a company, sort of within different settings. I think Deanna was exactly right. We do this well. The best of both worlds is that, and it's almost like you don't even have to decide right now when you use it or who's supposed to remember it or whatever, but when this gets done really well, you can have a more lengthy statement where you basically say, these are the things that are important. And, for people who look for certain information, they can find it there. But it's exactly right that a statement, any one of the top 4 statements could easily be made into a tagline if done right. So I'm actually really against the decision to say, should it be short or long, in my opinion, is backwards. I would be in favor that we have a debate, and I don't know if this is the right venue here in an officially scheduled board meeting or if there's some other venue, but look, I ran for the school board for things like this as much as anybody else. I think this is incredibly important that we speak very concisely with specific words, and we say, this is why I included the word educational innovation in my statement, because I would like the teachers to hear this from this board, regardless
of the superintendent and the principal and everybody else. We set the overarching policy. And so I'm not at all against eventually ending up with a tagline, but I believe, or what I've seen, the way this typically successfully works is that you have to put the time in and sort of haggle over certain things, but that's more in the context of a larger statement. And then when you have that, you can winnow it down to the ones that you really want people to remember.
I would agree. I mean, I like the number 6, the inspiring graduates. I mean, that's really a, if we had a piece that I would really like to see, it's that is, to your point, I want to inspire the children, the graduates of RB to be better people.
Can I ask a question? I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Laura.
All right. So it was my understanding that 1 through 4 are in their own category. We would be selecting something 1 through 4, and then 5 through 9 are the next part. It's not selecting 1 through 9. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I think we started there and we kind of went to a different place.
Well, because I don't see 5 through 9 equivalent with 1 through 4. I see 5 through 9 as the next part that you would tag on after. Once you pick something, you pick either something from 1 through 4 and then you pick something from 5 through 9. Is that what you were explaining or not?
No, I think the idea, the suggestion that was submitted by a board member was we should group these in the longer, kind of more robust that states the partnership. So those are the first 4 examples. And then the examples 5 through 9 were submitted by board members as a shorter, more concise statement. So I think, what Wes is saying, it might take a little longer, but I think if the board can submit, everybody pick 1 statement, we'll already have eliminated 2 by the next meeting, because we'll go from 9 to 7. If any board member chooses the same statement as somebody else, that would eliminate an extra statement. So now we're down to 6. And then at the July meeting, we debate those a little more and discuss those a little more, like Mr. Jacobs is suggesting.
I think that exercise will take us into the next place, right? It'll say, okay, this is where we're straw pulling the board. This is what we want to. This is where we want to go forward, and then we can take it to, because I don't think we can do whatever we want, right? We can change it even after the July. We can get to July, we can be like, okay, this is really what we want to do, and take part of 2 and part of 4, or however that works. I think there's some wordsmithing that'll need to be done at a point. I kind of think it'll be obvious next month when we come back and really think about it, right? I think this is a good start to a great discussion. I don't want to spend an hour. We could spend an hour easily on this, or 2, right? But I think we've got a lot to cover tonight. So, any thoughts on any disagreement on that plan? All right, that sounds great.
Wes, I mean, maybe as a suggestion, what if in preparation for the next board meeting, if we basically, all of us, to the extent that we can, maybe just put some of the underlying logic of why we also support something. The reason I'm mentioning it is, okay, we get rid of 2 now, that's great. But then next meeting, we have the same what do we do next? So I think how do we gain momentum? And I, you know, as far as the statement that I proposed, I'd be more than happy just to explain it in some more depth or whatever, but I don't want to, I'd rather hear you guys speak about it also.
All right, well, I think I got to do a little work outside of the meeting to you know, get us on a better page here. And, you know, I apologize. I just was focused on something else this last month, but I think we'll work on it, and I'll you know, reach out. I'll work with you, Tom, on a better way to go forward and get a more detailed plan, and I can you know, individually reach out to each board member and say, this is really the plan I want to go with.
I would still encourage each board member to identify one. We will have almost 4.5 weeks before our next meeting, so that's plenty of time for board members to look to see if they like to combine two or something. But we can go from 9 to 7 or possibly smaller. That's a good place to start. And I think what Tom's saying is going to just provide a little more color to their decision. I could update those weekly in the Friday update as long as people are submitting that.
I think that's a great idea. All right. Well, let's move on to additional discussion items. At this point in the meeting, Board of Education members may request to add an additional discussion item. Is there anybody who wants to add something?
I think we had one other discussion item. It's the agenda or a draft of agreement with engineering services. I think Mary Ann sent that out. We put that on either Friday or Monday.
We probably did. I probably have the one from last Thursday. I'm sorry.
So there is no work to be discussed tonight. I just want the board to be aware that this is the first draft submitted by the engineer we have been working on with the zoo project and for the fields and some of those things. And Kristen and I need to do a deep dive on this with the attorneys and go back and forth. We haven't done any negotiations, so this is their first offer. But this is the engineering firm that helped us do the bike path with the county and the zoo, and they've been helping us develop designs and project layouts for the current project. So I just wanted to at least get this on the agenda so the board can at least have access to this and know that Kristen and I will be working over the next couple of weeks with them should eventually a deal get done with the zoo. Thank you.
All right. Then we'll go to President's report. We already did that. We'll go to the superintendent's report.
Superintendent's report. There's a curriculum advisory council on June 16th. That's Miss Towner and Miss Baruska. They'll be meeting with Dr. Freitas, myself, Miss Augustine, and Miss Lindquist, and a board member had submitted a question about, are we looking at the graduation requirements? That will be the first meeting. For that, we will sit with the Curriculum Advisory Council and begin to discuss our current graduation requirements and layout, and if there's anything that needs to be tweaked with that. I would also suggest tonight, when we get to the policy section, at the previous meeting, I suggested that the board maybe look at 1 or 2 policies tonight, and then another 1 or 2 policies when we meet again in July. I would ask that one of the policies we do discuss tonight is the 6:310, just so that the board members and I have some information to take back to the Curriculum Advisory Council in regards to some of the PE waiver questions that have surfaced with the board. Facilities Advisory Council, no update. Finance Advisory Council, no update. The board is scheduled to approve a tentative budget tonight. And then obviously we'll wait for the June 30th actuals to be updated, and then we will have an additional board discussion on the budget again in July. Personnel Advisory Council, no update. Policy Advisory Council, there's no update. There was a question submitted. Had the Policy Council Had reviewed these drafts that we're discussing on the 4 policies over the next couple meetings. Yes, the Policy Advisory Council did review the initial edits and thought that those was a good place to start for our discussions as the whole board meets on these over the next couple weeks. Purchase or lease of land, no update. I am scheduled to meet with the zoo next week. And Liability Insurance Advisory Council, no update. We have not met yet, but Kristen will provide an update tonight on some of the additional information she recovered from some of the groups we're working with, and she can provide that when we get to old business. And that's it for the superintendent report, unless there are questions.
Okay, we'll move to the principal's report. Dr. Freitas.
Good evening, honorable board members of District 208. Good evening, parents, students, other community. Good evening, boss. I want to start off how we're winning every week at RB. Our superintendent, Dr. Skinkis, and I will be listening and engaging our stakeholders through a series of forums and reflections about race and equity. Our goals are to provide stakeholders an opportunity to share what's on their mind, reflect on local practices as it relates to race and equity, and more importantly, co-create solutions for the safety and inclusion of all. We know that race and equity is an issue right now, guys, throughout our entire country. We see it in the news. So what we're gonna do is just bring people together. Let's listen to them. Let's see what's on their mind. Students, your forum will be on June 16th. Families and parents, guardians, your forum will be on June 23rd. And staff members, your forum will be on June 30th, all from 7 to 8 p.m. I will be sharing the specific Zoom information a day prior to the actual meeting, so please look out for that. Some other good news, the music department just recently acquired a new marimba. You gotta check it out, because it was the first time I saw this instrument. So marimba is a percussion instrument consisting of a set of wooden bars struck with a yarn and rubber mallet to produce musical tones. Also, I attended the new band member orientation today. I saw over 40 8th graders from all of our feeder schools. It was a beautiful moment to share with them. Our students are excited for a band program, and I hope the parents, our teachers, and students are excited because we, our superintendent, we are listening and we are working to make sure that our music department is always supported. Guys, this is a census year, Census 2020. Please complete the census form. For more information, please visit our website and click on the Census 2020 for additional information. Remember, we need all of our funding. Every individual counts, so please make sure to fill out the census form. Throughout the month of May and June, we have been conducting interviews for the dean's positions at RB. Our interview panel/committee has included clerical staff, students, parents, and instructional coaches, teachers. This has been a thorough process with over 50 candidates being screened, 15 candidates being invited to first round interviews, and 4 candidates being invited for a second round interview. We are presenting 1 candidate tonight for approval, and we'll be conducting more interviews later on this week so we can have another candidate ready for the July Board of Education meeting. We are continuing locker cleanout. Juniors, this is your week, June 8th to the 11th. And then freshmen, next week is your week for locker cleanout, June 15th through the 18th. Residency. Guys, we know we are a one-to-one school and we also have done blended learning. So it only makes sense for us to include an online portion. So to minimize contact and to build upon what we've created already, we're currently working on making part of the resident process online. It's going to be a blended experience. Part of it will be online and part of it will be in person. And here are some updates from the state and from the Illinois State Board of Education. As shared earlier by our superintendent, driver's education behind the wheel will be permitted with strict guidelines. So I'm currently working with Mr. Rec, one of our teachers, to continue driver's education behind the wheel this coming summer. I will be sending specific information about the dates, the times, and the eligibility. But please remember, this is very important. Students that have had their permit the longest will get priority for the behind the wheel experience. And that is my principal's report. If there are any questions, I'm all ears.
Got one hand up, and Miss Sierra.
I just have a fast question. Can I ask, where does RB advertise when you guys have openings? So when you advertise for the dean opening, is it just on Apple Track, or can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Currently, we've been, from what I'm aware of, we've been using Apple Track. That's the system that we have been using thus far. I don't know if Dr. Skinkis or Kristen has any additional information, but that is the system that I've worked with. And we've been getting tons of applicants. So, what we're doing now is working, but I'm sure, we could be open, to other advertising areas as well. But I think our system right now is pretty good.
Kristen, you have any other additional information?
We also post on K-12 Job Spot as well as the IASA job bank website as well.
Okay, any other thoughts for or questions for principal?
I just would like to ask if we could have the parent community member link for the forum, the equity forums shared with us. I would like to attend.
Of course, Mr. Town. I'll make sure that I share that with our superintendent, and he'll get it to all the board members, of course.
Thank you.
All right, then we'll go to the assistant superintendent's report.
Good evening. I received a few questions on this report, and I will try to weave the responses into the report, but certainly happy to answer any questions as well. My board report begins on board book page 21, and this will be providing financial information for up through May 30th, 2020, which represents 92% of the fiscal year. On board book page 21, this is a monthly summary report. And as you can see, the total operating revenue for the month was $468,791, with 38% coming from evidence-based funding, which is our state funding, 32% coming from a combined property tax and CPPRT, and 12% coming from federal and state grant reimbursements. The total operating expenditures for the month were $2,072,629, with 73% towards salary and benefits and 10% towards special education tuition. On the next page in board book, the monthly financial statements begin. Year to date in operating funds, the district has received $26,051,701 and has expended $24,417,134. Excuse me. So right now we have a small surplus, and this will be spent down next month. As the district does not anticipate significant revenue for the remainder of the fiscal year, there still is a possibility that we will receive some state payments for categoricals such as special education tuition and transportation. I checked on those today, and they said scheduled. Typically they come out every June. There is a question as to whether or not we'll receive these due to COVID-19. So that's still up in the air, but that will be our only significant revenue at this point. On board book page 23, the summary of revenues shows that the district has received 98% of our revenue in the operating funds for this year. However, as I mentioned last board meeting, this is due to some unanticipated revenue sources, which I've listed below. Without this additional revenue, the district would have collected 97% of the budgeted revenue, which is roughly 2% lower than where we were at this time last year. There's a question about why we're a little bit lower in budgeted revenue. Certainly some of this is due to property tax collections, student fees, and state payments that I recently talked about. But we'll have some more concrete information obviously next month, as we will be officially closed for fiscal year 20. There was a question submitted about student fees from this year. We are still chasing $6,576 for this school year in unpaid student fees. On the next page, Board Book page 24, Summary of Expenditures shows that the district has spent 91% of the budgeted expenditures for this year. In the operating accounts, and this amount is similar to this time last fiscal year. And then the next few reports are monthly reports that I include. The first one is a statement of revenue and expenditures for the month, which lists all the revenues and expenditures for each individual account and compares budget to actual. And then also for your information, I've included the student activity summary report for the month of May. And when you're looking at this, it's just important to remember that negative account balances represent positive fund balances for this account. And that concludes my report.
Dr. Smetana, can you please repeat the outstanding fee balance? Because I don't know if I heard you right.
Sure, it is $106,576.
Okay, I did hear you correctly.
Correct. I am trying to pull some information as to how that compares to previous fiscal years, but given the timing and we had a short power outage here at RB, I wasn't able to get that information. So I don't know how that compares to previous fiscal years, but I'm working on that as well.
Thank you.
Well, if I might, by the end of the year, because of prom and other things, our fees would have been pretty much caught up if anybody wanted to attend those end of the year activities, correct?
Certainly that plays into it. Students still need to pay their statement off in full in order to receive an official transcript. Certainly for some students that doesn't hold as much weight as going to prom and having multiple graduation tickets, but that certainly does help in collecting some of the student fees. But yes, Laura, certainly that has had an impact on, I think, the amount of money we've collected.
Can I ask one last question? So because our last quarter of sports, had we collected any money then had to rebate monies? And
we did collect some money. And so parents were given the option, we were going to roll that over to their, well, a couple of things. The first option is we would credit their account. So if they still owed us money for something else, we communicated to families that would be our first line would be to credit their account and to go that way. The second way would be to roll that over into the next fiscal year so that they would have a credit going into the following year. Also, parents, though, at any time had the ability to send us an email and say that they would like the full refund, and then we would process the refund and give them a check. We recognize that some families needed that money, and we wanted to be able to return that money to them.
Where do we think we're going to end up?
I think it's going to be really close. I think it depends on these state payments. I do think, based off what I saw in the system today, there is a chance we could receive our fourth state payment in June. And if that is the case, I do believe we have the possibility of finishing with a slight surplus or a very small deficit.
So we might be actually better off if we had that fourth payment next year, because
that would help us. Next year, we will
need the money.
definitely be hurting financially, yes.
Just a thought.
Again,
the state ask the state to hold?
Not paying its bills on time.
Right. Deanna, you have something to say?
I'm sorry. Is there any way to ask them to hold that payment till next July or until July? Or it's in process and that's the end of it?
It's in process, I believe.
Okay.
It's a state system that's automated through, it's called FRIZ. It goes out to every single school district in the state of Illinois, where we've gotten, where we've have caught, I wouldn't say a break, but where it fell to an upcoming fiscal year is if the 4th of July holiday fell, where the 4th of July holiday fell and how the treasurer's office was closed or how many people took vacation and when they decided to process that payment onto our actual book. It has been somewhat how it's been done, but if they release it, a week or two before June 30th, I think it's going to apply to this year.
Okay.
All right, any further questions for Kristen? All right, then we'll move to consent agenda.
Wes, can I ask? Wes, can I
Yes,
interrupt really
of course.
quickly?
Go ahead.
Just, I want to circle back really quick because before, Wes, you moved to agenda item number 6, additional discussion items, and then we were circling back to number 5D, draft agreement from engineering services. And then we went into the report. So I would actually like to just make I don't know if we need to add it to the agenda, but I do have a brief statement that relates to the statement you made at the beginning of the meeting, and it has to do with positive events today that I would like not only the board, but also members of the community to be aware of. So I can either just say that now or add it as an additional discussion item for later on the agenda.
Right, so we could put it at number, what's that, 12? 12? Yeah. So do you mind if we just do it? Okay.
Sounds great. Yep,
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and we'll do it there. And sorry for the moving around. I've got an old.
No worries.
All right, so where were we? Consent agenda, action item. Approval of minutes, right?
Correct. We would need a motion, please.
The Board of Education, Township High School, District 208, County, Illinois, takes the following action on the listed consent agenda items. Approves minutes from the meetings held on May 12th and May 26th, 2020, open and closed as presented in the June 9th, 2020 board agenda packet.
Second,
Second.
okay. Ms. Salas, this is second. And this is a all in favor, correct?
It's a roll call. I believe.
Roll call. Thank you, Marianne. Roll call.
Mr. Durkin,
Yes.
Ms. Ruska,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs,
Yes.
Ms. Sierra,
Yes.
Towner,
Yes.
Ms. Salas,
Yes.
Mr. Smithing.
Yes. All right, we'll move to old business, action items, life safety, capital improvements.
No update at this time. We are formalizing our weekly construction meeting with the roofer and mechanical company for the HVAC unit over the gymnastics gym. And those will be happening weekly. And Kristen and Joel will take the primary lead with that project.
Move to liability insurance.
Kristen has provided an update tonight. I'll let her discuss some of the information the board previously requested at our last meeting. So I'll turn the mic over to Kristen, please.
Based upon the additional requests from the board at the last meeting, I've updated the report, and given the length of the report, I outlined the new information in red throughout the document. So first, I added some additional information for common plans for 3 similar districts that use Alliant as their broker, so that we could, as a group, better compare some of the options should the board choose to go with Alliant. They can see what some of the typical coverages are, as well as what the cost is. I also added some additional cooperatives that are in the state of Illinois, along with some notes. You can see them all listed in the board report. But really, my analysis are there are two other cooperatives that are not managed by Gallagher, and one I'm not certain on. So I just received a contact today for the Education School Insurance Cooperative. This cooperative consists of mainly smaller districts located in Will County. So I just received an email contact today, and I'll be reaching out to them. And then the other cooperative doesn't, it certainly is a cooperative. It's the Illinois County Risk Management Trust, but it doesn't operate in the sense of the other cooperatives. It operates a little differently. And so I spoke to the cooperative and then also spoke to Alliant to confirm this information. And really, if the board were to choose to go with this cooperative, we would first choose to pick a broker, whether it be Alliant or a different cooperative, and then that broker would go out to market for us. And one of the options would be to join this cooperative if it's the best pricing or if it fits the needs of the district. So it's a little different in the sense of you wouldn't choose this cooperative and it's not run in the same or managed in the same sense as the other cooperatives that we have been discussing. But this is an option, but again, we would choose to pick a broker first. Again, I know this is a lot of information, and certainly we will work through this with the sub-advisory committee. We'll meet before the July board meeting, but I wanted to present all of this information to the board in case any of the board members were interested in this additional information, and to show that we're continuing to collect and gather information in order to make the best decision possible.
I would just say thanks for all the additional research. It's a big subject for sure.
Yes, thank you for Kristen for all your hard work. And I would also like to thank Bill for spending about half hour, 45 minutes on the phone with me the other day, going over some of the background information that would be needed to help make an informed decision about this. So thank you, Bill.
Well, I extend that over to all board members if they have any questions, concerns. There's no such thing as a silly question. Be happy to spend as much time as needed to try to provide clarity so we can make a good decision for the district.
All right. Any other questions about the insurance program? We'll move on to facility use agreement.
Facility use agreement, no questions were submitted. Because it is a longer document, almost like a contract or a policy for the district, I did not add this to the consent agenda and would prefer that we take a roll call vote on it.
Well, since there were no questions, I can go ahead and read the motion, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Board of Education, Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby approves the facility use agreement as presented in the June 9th, 2020 board agenda packet.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Jacobs. Mary Ann, roll call.
Ms. Ruska,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs,
Yes.
Ms. Sierra,
Yes.
Ms. Towner,
Yes.
Ms. Salas,
Yes.
Mr. Durkin,
Yes.
Mr. Smithing.
Yes. All right, we'll go on to the tentative budget. I know we always have to explain this as tentative budget.
The tentative budget is, the board approves the tentative budget. We put it on display for at least 60 days. Every board meeting, though, we use a placeholder on the agenda to continue to discuss the FY21 budget. So basically, this is approving the tentative budget so that effective July 1, the administration and departments can begin to purchase stuff for the next school year. The formal budget is not adopted until September business meeting. So we will use July and August to review the actuals from June, make any changes, anything that needs to be addressed, reduced, increased, those types of things can still occur, and we do post this as they're up as the agenda. As the budget is updated. It is updated also on the website so that it's available for public view. And there were no additional questions submitted on the tentative budget. There was one budget item that was submitted, I think, for the July meeting, and Kristen will address that on expenditures greater than increasing more than CPI.
I just wanted to make a comment that we traditionally put expenditures, you say it better, Kevin, but right, like we're conservative on the revenue side and a little maybe heavy on the expenditure side, and that has seemed to serve us well in this process in the past. Did I say that right?
Yes, that's traditionally how we did it last year. Ms. Zalis and Mr. Smithing spent an additional amount of time with Ms. Smetana and myself to make sure that we were trying to get even more of an accurate forecast. However, when you're dealing with your primary sources of revenue are property tax collection from the county and payments from the state, you can only be so specific. You know, as Kristen mentioned, if we get all 4 payments, we got some additional interest revenue and some things that we weren't planning on. There's still a chance that we'll come in this year under budget. For this tentative budget, the Finance Advisory Council, which is Mr. Smithing, Ms. Zalis, myself, and Ms. Smetana, Dr. Smetana, we did err on the side of caution. Historically, we usually go around 98 to 98.5% of property tax collection, and we lowered that to 97. The reason for that being, Cook County has already said they're giving a 60-day extension on the August property tax collection payment. And we also think there will be some delinquent payments as well as some payments that just are forfeited and don't pay. We also are anticipating an increase in appeals due to the impact the pandemic has had on the economy. So our tentative budget deficit does look a little higher as those dollars continue to come in. That's something we can adjust as we get closer to September.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on the tentative budget and the process we're about to embark on? All right, let's read the motion then.
Okay, the Board of Education, Township High School, District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby approves the tentative budget for the FY21 as presented in the June 9th, 2020 board agenda packet.
There's a second.
Sure, I'll second.
All right. Mary Ann?
Mr. Jacobs,
Yes.
Ms. Sierra,
Yes.
Ms. Towner,
Yes.
Ms. Salas,
Yes.
Mr. Durkin,
Yes.
Ms. Ruska,
Yes.
Mr. Smithing.
Yes. All right, so let's go into board policies. So one of the things that, you know, I guess to do is have the policy advisory committee look these over, but I do agree maybe we need to get, I would like to look at this 7.26, the exemption for physical education.
Yeah, so my recommendation for tonight, I would say that maybe we could leave the 200s for the July meeting. I think the easiest one to attack as far as a procedural or actual policy change is really just combining 412 and 420. So if the board could possibly consider taking action to eliminate policy 412 and adopt 420 as edited. I received one set of comments only from a board member on 420, and they would like to eliminate the words both in the short term and long term, and also eliminate representing approximately 4 months of operations. I do not have issue with those two suggestions, and if the other board members do not, we can easily do a vote to delete policy 4:12 and to adopt 4:20 as discussed and amended at tonight's meeting. Mike, you got to share your screen. It's board book page 125, please.
I don't have any issues with those changes either, and I'm in favor of supporting going with the 420 as you've mentioned.
And Mike, if you could make that a little bigger, since it's just on one page, please. So the only changes that were submitted were to strike both in the short and long term. So the policy would, and then the other one was to eliminate the explanation representing approximately 4 months of operating expenses or of operation. If there's no other concerns, Laura's on the advisory council. Gina, any concerns with those suggestions?
No, I don't. No, it looks good.
So if we could maybe get a motion to, Mary Ann, did you provide a motion for the policy changes by each policy, or did you do it as a group?
I thought it was per each policy.
I have,
It's for each policy.
All right.
yes, I have 4 separate ones here.
Okay, so could you read the one, what's the one related to 412 and 420? Does it talk about eliminating 412 and combining?
No, there's one for 220, 223, 412, and 6.
I think the one in 412 has got both things in it.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're
it
right,
says-
it does, I'm sorry.
It includes 420. Yep.
412 and
Yes.
420, sorry, yes.
So we'll have to say that as per discussed with the amendments, right?
Well, you would say as presented and amended
Yes.
in the. Correct?
Yes,
Right.
as
Yes,
presented,
correct.
discussed, and amended.
Okay. That's the only one that's changing?
I think that's the one we should approve right now.
Okay. All right, I will read the motion. The Board of Education Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby approves updates for policies 4:12, operating fund balances, and policy 4:20, fund balances, as presented and amended in the June 9th, 2020 Board Agenda Packet.
And let the record show that the amendment to 4:12 is to eliminate that policy.
Second. Oh, sorry, Gina.
All right. So second by Ms. Sierra and Mary Ann?
Ms. Sierra,
Yes.
Ms. Towner,
Yes.
Ms. Salas,
Yes.
Mr. Durkin,
Yes.
Ms. Ruska,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs,
Yes.
Mr. Smithing.
Yes.
Okay, so the next policy, Mike, if you can go to board book page 126. And I don't believe we'll have enough of a discussion tonight necessarily to approve these. But I think it's important for the board to discuss these before the Curriculum Advisory Council on June 16th. Mike, if you could mute the people in the room so I'm getting feedback again. So the discussion that's come up with the board, one in particular, is obviously the state few years ago with the unfunded mandates had made an emphasis on physical education waivers, which has led to a discussion about our policy with physical education waiver, which is included in 6:310 as well as in 7:260. The one discussion, the only questions that I received tonight for tonight's meeting, right now, our current policy, and this was something that was adjusted a few years back, we only allow varsity athletes that are in grades 11 through 12 to take PE waivers. And the other caveat is that the varsity athletes that take PE waivers are re-enrolled in their PE course at the end of their specific sports season. And so from a scheduling perspective, when a student comes in November to schedule their classes, even if they're a varsity athlete, they are still then being scheduled for a PE class for the next year. And so that, I will use a fall athlete cross country, if at the end of their 9 to 11-week season, then for the remainder of whatever's left of second quarter, they are re-enrolled in their PE class. So that they are able to take a study hall for that during their their athletic season, then they're re-enrolled. So one of the discussions that was presented at a previous meeting from a board member was, well, why wouldn't we just allow them to stay in the study hall for the entire semester? We do have some kids that prefer to take a PE class, some kids don't. So I mean, that's something the board needs to consider if they want to amend the policy that where students' PE waivers could apply for that semester. Historically, a few years back, we made a change, but prior to a few years back, the marching band was allowed to take a PE waiver and be exempt from PE for the entire year. And the board at that time, this was maybe my first or second year on the job here, but the board at that time had concerns with that because then it gave an advantage for both students that were in the marching band to take 2 additional academic classes where athletes had to go back to PE when their season was over. And so the change that was made at that time was if you are in marching band, you can only waive out of the fall semester since that's when the band does march at the football games and does do outside marching and physical activity. So there is some precedent in place that if the board wanted to shift to where the athletes can waive a semester of PE, that can occur. We would need to get some direction from you tonight if that's something you would like the advisory council to work on. The other question that was submitted, as stated previously, was should that be limited to juniors and seniors, or could it go to freshmen and sophomore? All freshmen take PE 9. It's kind of like the introductory to high school PE class. They do a broad curriculum and kind of touch on a few different content areas. And then sophomore year, you have to take the health requirement. So one of the reasons I think it's always been limited to juniors and seniors is because that's where you kind of get into more of the not necessarily elective, but you get the selection process of PE, whether you want to take weightlifting, team sports, mind and body, lifeguarding, those types of PE classes. So I don't know if it's a good idea to be allowing freshmen necessarily to be waiving out of PE, so that we make sure they do get at least some requirements completed of the state requirement. And then the second sophomore year, they're only taking 1 semester of PE and 1 semester of health.
Is health still a state requirement for graduation?
It is. So what we would have to determine if this is something the advisory council could work on if the board would like, what we would have to determine is to figure out, and we could work through this with Ms. Augustine, Ms. Lindquist, we would have to determine like, you know, if when a kid's picking classes in November, how we would account, you know, they can say, hey, I'm going to be a varsity basketball player. Well, if they get cut from the varsity basketball team, the next year, we have to be able to have some room in some of our PE classes so they have a place to go, right? So because you're kind of scheduling a kid in November or December for the next school year. So you just there has to be, we'd have to create some type of administrative procedure. So if that student is still not a varsity athlete at that time, they would have to be enrolled in a PE class. And the other, go ahead.
Just a question. Marching band, that fall semester waiver of PE, that does apply to just juniors and seniors or all 4 years?
I am, Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that applies to all 4 years. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Why would we do it any different for the kid that plays football?
I could get some background from that for the curriculum advisory if the board wants me to look into that.
I mean, in my opinion, if a kid is on varsity, highly unlikely as a freshman, right? But they're putting in the time and the hours. I hear what you're saying about the other requirements in 9th grade, but I think we're already making an exception for marching band students. Would just think that varsity is I'd like to get Mr. Curtin's opinion on that. If varsity seems to be the delineator of where we draw the line.
Yes, I could check. I could have him provide some information as well for the advisory council that we can report to the group in July. So I think the bigger thing that we need to discuss is, if I just make sure I have this correct, we want to look at, for athletes, just correct me if I'm wrong, athletes, the ability to waive a semester, correct? Not just during their season. That's my first question.
I would say yes, the whole semester.
All right. My second question is, if they are multi-sport varsity athletes, are we allowing them to waive both semesters?
Yes. If you're playing 2 varsity sports, I think you don't need to go take PE.
If you're a winter athlete, doesn't your season span 2nd quarter and 3rd quarter, which means it would be 2 semesters? How does that work? Or do you only waive out a 2nd semester because you don't know that you're going to make the team, right?
That is the discussion we will have at the advisory council. My advice to the group would be winter sports would be waived from 2nd semester because the majority of their season is January, February, and half of March. The winter sports season is only like a week or 2 of November, and then 2 weeks of December, and we're out of the semester because usually of winter break and exams. But that's something we can finalize as an advisory council. I wanted to get to kind of the expectations or directions from the board. So athletes, if I'm reading this correctly, I just want to make sure I'm taking accurate notes. Athletes can waive for a semester instead of just their season. Multi-sport athletes can waive both semesters. Is that correct?
Yeah, and do we limit it to only varsity, or are we saying all athletes?
I think that was a question. Deanna brought up the point that we allow freshmen to waive a semester of PE, so they have to take at least 1 semester. So the caveat could be that 9th and 10th graders are only allowed to waive 1 semester, where maybe juniors and seniors can waive 2 if they're in a varsity sport and marching band or 2 varsity sports. Does that sound like a compromise the board is supporting?
I mean, because whether you're JV or varsity, you still have the same amount of practice.
Yes, I don't think varsity is the key. I think it was just always to 11th and 12th graders.
Well, I think, yeah. Well, I agree with that. I think we need to move forward with the advisory council to come back with recommendations.
And that's 9th and 10th grade can waive 1 semester, whether that's either for band or in athletics.
Right.
That seems reasonable.
So if I'm a sophomore and I'm a varsity athlete, I have to take health. And then I have my PE waiver. If I'm a marching band, I have to take marching band as a sophomore, and I have to take my health. And then as a freshman, it's 1 semester of either marching band or marching band or a sport, and then a semester of PE. And I will verify what we can and can't do with the board policy and with the state, and we will work on that at the advisory council. The other thing I would like to draw to your attention in 6:310 is on page 128, Mike, if you can go to that, please. And if you could zoom in, please, Mike. So the board, or the people watching can see this, so try to go to 100% if you can. 120 maybe. Okay, so yeah, as we begin to review graduation requirements, which is the other directive the board had given the superintendent and Ms. Lindquist a few meetings ago, this is the other section of kind of like our requirements under this policy. And this is some of the changes we've made historically in regards to fine arts survey and some of our additional classes. I don't know if our global area studies is on there, but I just want to make sure the board is aware. I highlighted this in yellow because this is another course that's come up in the past, the performing arts course or the fine arts survey. This may be another course that can be looked at. So as we begin as a curriculum and advisory council to look at the graduation requirements and to see if there's any changes that would either streamline graduation requirements or provide more opportunities for students to have more selection in the classes they want to take, I would advise the advisory council, and just so the board would know, I would probably avoid looking at any type of core classes, but focus more on some of our specific elective requirements we require and try to eliminate the specificity, there's my slur there, of kind of like giving students specific electives they have to take, and after they get through their, their 16 core requirements of math, science, English, social studies, government, etc., that we have some more flexibility in the elective areas. So that's what where we would do our focus on after the PE waiver stuff, is looking at some of our elective requirements. Is there any concerns with that from the board?
I don't see anybody raising their hand here. So I think that gives us a moving forward to look at that.
Okay, so we got the advisory council will work on the PE waivers and graduation requirements. And then we can discuss the 200 at the next board meeting, if the board's okay with that, those two policies.
Sounds like a plan. All right, so we'll move to new business and payment of the bills.
Chris, do you want to address any questions submitted?
There were no questions submitted.
Okay, oh, sorry. Ready?
Yep.
The Board of Education, Township High School, District 208, Cook County, Illinois approves the payment of bills as presented in the June 9th, 2020 board agenda packet.
Have a second.
Second.
Mr. Jacobs, Mary Ann?
Ms. Towner,
Yes.
Ms. Salas,
Yes.
Mr. Durkin,
Yes.
Ms. Ruska,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs,
Yes.
Ms. Sierra,
Yes.
Mr. Smithing.
Yes. All right, we'll move to the intergovernment agreement, West 40 Regional Safe Schools Program.
This is an annual agreement the board approves, just locking in a price range. In the event we have to send a student to an alternative placement, we work with West 40 and the alternative school. This is more of a formality. However, if the board wants to have a second read, they could have that option.
Do we get any questions on this?
We have not.
Okay. I think we can read the motion.
Okay. Board of Education, Township High School, District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby approves the intergovernmental agreement for FY 2021 between West 40 and School District 208 for the purpose of placing students into the West 40 Regional Safe Schools program if the need arises, with the tuition of $115 per day as presented in the June 9th, 2020 board agenda packet.
Need a second?
Second.
Mrs. Sierra, Mary Ann?
Ms. Salas,
Yes.
Mr. Durkin,
Yes.
Ms. Ruska,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs,
Yes.
Ms. Sierra,
Yes.
Ms. Towner,
Yes.
Mr. Smithing.
Yes. All right, matters for closed session when personnel, sale and lease of property, collective negotiation, school safety, and confidentiality closed session minutes. Visitor statements, still have no visitor statements, correct? And the discussion item, so this is your, Tom, you said you wanted to have something?
Yes, thank you, Wes. This is going to be very brief, but I did want to circle back to the statement you made at the beginning of the meeting, Wes, and thank you for your leadership in coalescing a statement for the board. Earlier today, starting at 11 o'clock, there was a peaceful protest staged in Riverside that I attended. And it was a gathering of a few hundred people, and I didn't know this going there, but the event had actually been organized entirely by RB students, basically 2020 graduates. And speaking on behalf of the African American community and you know, the victims of the current racial injustice that we're experiencing were Devin Conrad, Shala, and Simone Russell, all 2020 RBHS graduates. And I just wanted to state it publicly here and also bring it to the attention to anybody who's watching. Their speeches were incredibly heartfelt. They were inspirational. They were reasonable. And to me, they were deeply moving. And I think it was, I know I speak for everyone who was there. And so, you know, I think it's important as we are about to entering a number of conversations that will be uncomfortable, that will be raw, that will be honest, hopefully, and as sincere as the talks were today. I'm sure it's not lost on anyone that there are 7 of us and none of us are African American. And so what I'm trying to say is that at this event today, listening to members of that community express how they feel is incredibly important. And I think for all of us, for every member of the community, now is a time to just listen. And again, I'm bringing it back to the fact these were RB graduates, and Devin was talking about how it felt for him to be a member of RB, and he said it was a great school, and he said we're proud of the school and all of that. But he said, as he was at the school and in classes, that he always felt that he had to sort of change who he fundamentally was because he felt he needed to fit in. And so all I'm trying to say is that I think this moment that is so painful for all of us, that is going to be so uncomfortable, I think it's very important that anyone who may be listening or any member of the community ought to know. And this is why I'm very proud of this board, being a member of this board, having coalesced around a statement that this commitment of ours to listen is very real. And we have to start breaking the cycle of inactivity. It's been too long. We all know it. But before we all start speaking, which is our role, but this is a moment where we need to listen. And we had a beautiful example of how this can work respectfully, reasonably, heartfelt, and all the rest of it. And I'm extremely proud of those graduates as well as all the other ones. But I wanted to let all of you know, and also hopefully for people who may be watching this. Thank you.
Laura, you have your hand up? I think you're on mute.
Just wanted to add a short comment. Had technical difficulty in the beginning, didn't get there right up front. It's definitely a win when our graduates are able to organize a peaceful protest on their own and be a part of the democracy of this country and move forward doing that. And I do want to say that as a school, the hardest thing that we can do, the school, is to remain in that neutral place so that the school does not become unwilling, the mouthpiece for any particular party or philosophy or movement, either way. If we want to make it a place where all students, all families, beliefs, religions, where they feel comfortable to grow so that when they leave the school, they could do an event such as you experienced, it's a very difficult place for us to be in. And I think, you know, I give a lot of credit to our administration that has done that so far. And it may look passive, but I think there's always pressure on the outside for an organization to take a stand. And by doing that, you inadvertently are becoming the mouthpiece for one group or another. And we don't want to do that. We want the students to be free to be able to go and organize and peacefully express without constraints. I mean, that's my, but I think as a school board, that's our purpose, I think.
All right, thank you. Any other thoughts? We'll go to consideration of items for future meetings. Any items? Then why don't Ramona, you read the closed session?
You betcha. The Board of Education Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois enters closed session for the purpose of considering appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, purchase, sale, or lease of real property, collective negotiations, school safety, and confidentiality of closed session minutes.
Second. Mr. Jacobs, Mary Ann?
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs?
Yes.
Sierra?
Yes.
Towner?
Yes.
Zalis?
Yes.
Mr. Smithing?
Yes. And then that'll bring our meeting to a close. Thank you very much.